Hey everyone, welcome to Burns 2. Today we are doing an interview as part of we have like a Vote 17 series here at the University of Otago. We've been running it for quite a few weeks. We've been interviewing some really good politicians across the spectrum. Today we're going to open it up a little bit more publicly and a little bit more informally. And today we're going to have one of the youngest candidates, or I think the youngest candidate running this election, Chlöe Swarbrick. I'm going to hand you over to my co-host, Maungakiekie, and my name's Cam Meads, and we'll be your host today.
Yay.
Hi, my name's Anya. So, how are you doing today, Chloe?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, awesome. So, it's been a pretty exciting run up to the election already. How are you feeling about it all?
It's been a time, yeah. How I'm feeling about the election. I'm feeling incredibly positive about the fact that there's totally a mood for change at the moment. What we know is that it's really volatile out there. We've had polls that have totally contradicted each other, so every vote counts this election. Yeah. Just campaigning to make sure that everybody knows that and they should party vote green.
So, you're obviously an advocate for youth engagement.
Yeah, I kind of have mocked that up, taken that as a result of being a young person in politics, I guess. It wasn't necessarily what I explicitly set out to do. I was just like, there's this major gap between people in politics. So I was at this little radio station, #1 alternative radio station in Auckland, called 95BFM for 4.5 years. And I would spend ages, producing investigative journalistic pieces on stuff and thinking that it would be this bombshell when I released this report and everything would change and accountability would happen. And then nothing happened and it was gone by the next news cycle. And that was kind of my frustration operating within a cultural sphere trying to bring about change. So I decided to enter into the political sphere and try and have people understand that politicians are supposed to work for you, not the other way around, I'm trying to ensure that everybody feels empowered, all of the people who are disengaged and disenfranchised by the current political system. Because the people who have the most to gain by voting demographically are the least inclined to vote.
Why do you think young people are so disengaged? Do you think this is a problem that's getting worse? Or what's the problem here?
I think that there's no one issue in isolation. So there's no silver bullet to addressing it. I think that for a long time, politics and politicians haven't looked like young people. There's a reason for that. The average politician doesn't look like me. It looks like a 40, 50-year-old dude in a suit. That's because that's where power and wealth has traditionally been held, and it continues to perpetuate itself as well, as long as we don't disrupt that. So I think representation, but representation is not the be-all and end-all. If you look at the biggest youth movements in both the States and the UK in the past few decades, it's been two old white dudes, Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn. So I think that substantive policy is an important part, and having a trustworthy kind of leader or individuals who people can kind of follow in that respect potentially, but also an understanding that your life can tangibly change as a result of participating in politics. That has kind of been absent for a long time. Yeah.
So aside from voting, what can young people do to engage in politics?
Protest. We should all protest. I think that what we've seen, obviously I'm 23 years old. I talk a lot about the context of our political system and how it's changed in the past few decades, but that's all obviously as a result of reading and doing my research. But subsequent to kind of the 1980s, when ye olde neoliberalism happened in Aotearoa, subsequent to that we've kind of seen the co-option of the faux American dream in this country, I believe. And what I mean by that is that we've become incredibly individualised. So that's part and parcel of the rise of insecure work and insecure housing, but it has a lot to do with when we see an issue, we internalise it and we don't identify it as a systemic issue, which means that we don't see the system as a way to change things. We have to change ourselves to fit the system. I really think that collective action is the best way to bring about change, particularly for all sectors of society. But I think the inherent problem there is that right now, protesting is not seen as kind of cool, but also the media reports on it in a really bad light. So, for example, the TPPA protest is the example that I frequently use. But the way that the media framed that was, to take the picture of the person who most embodied the stereotype of the protester and, splash them across the front page or on the 6 o'clock news and then go, protesters are disrupting traffic, not these New Zealanders are fighting for their rights and their freedoms and their futures. So I think that there's a big problem with framing there, and that is not going to change unless we disrupt it, and that's going to require mass movement.
I just want to bring you back to youth representation. Mm-hmm. So you talked about yourself, obviously. I know you really don't pride yourself on,
I'm a token,
on young people to vote.
Yeah.
But you talked about, old white dudes in suits.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
What about, Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, old white dudes in suits,
yeah,
probably arguably best represented young people in a long time that we've seen.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think actually sometimes the system does work, or do you think that actually shows that there's a fundamental flaw because it's quite odd when we have an old white guy who represents young people?
So there's kind of two parts there. It's like, can you have a shock or surprise person who looks like the status quo who represents different ideals? Yeah, absolutely, because not all people are homogenous within certain demographics. But the other side of it is that, can the system work? Absolutely believe that the system can work. The system that we've got is representative democracy. It's not inherently flawed, but we've allowed it to run away from us because it's not representative. If you look at voter turnout, for example, from 2014, the last general election, and compare the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, so six years there, and the 70-plus-year-old age bracket, so there's like 70 till you die, basically. So it's like 40 potential years there. There's only 10,000 more people in the 70-plus-year-old age bracket, but 150,000 more of them vote. That is disproportionate representation in a big way. So, yeah, that's basically why it's crucial that young people are out and voting.
Is that not the freedom of choice to vote, though?
That is the freedom of choice to vote, but arguably Australians would go, our compulsory system is working as well.
Yeah. So I was just about to ask you about that as well, actually. So what are your thoughts on the compulsory voting system?
I don't know. My gut feeling is that I'm not a big fan of coercion or compulsion. But I also have talked to many Australians, some of whom think that it's great and it works. Others go, you're inclined to waste your vote because you just have to turn up and you'll tick any box. So I don't think that compulsory voting is going to be the silver bullet that's going to fix everything. I think that we have to take a long-term view of it and go, what kind of society do we want? If we want people who are engaged and act as citizens per se, then what does a citizen look like? Perhaps we need civics education in schools, Green Party policy. We need civics in schools, I think, but I also think that we need greater funding for public interest journalism, because right now there is a massive issue with journalism being a check and balance on the powers that be. I don't have the figures, but I would assume that the majority of New Zealanders get their news from commercial broadcasters. Nothing, again, wrong with being a commercial broadcaster, but commercial broadcasters rely on profit incentive. If you rely on profit incentive, then you're more inclined to go for clickbait over substance, especially in the there's just a hurricane of information out there at the moment, so to have to sift through that, and they're paying journalists less and less, so it has to be a multi-pronged approach.
What if there was an abstinence option on the voting ticket? So I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure in Australia there's an abstinence option, so you have to go to the polls, and if you don't want to vote, you just go tick.
Yeah.
Would that actually help engage people, because they're more inclined to go, I'm actually going to listen to what people have to say? And
I don't think it fixes a flawed kind of system. I don't think it fixes the fact that there's still not enough average people, for lack of a better word, who are running for office or who see themselves in politics. And this probably relates to why I'm such a big, I love MMP, and I think that MMP is awesome. Obviously, Rod Donald and Jeanette Fitzsimons, who were co-founders of the Green Party, were huge advocates for it and campaigned for it subsequent to the 1980s. And the reason for that is that when you operate in a first-past-the-post system with two major parties, you essentially have a monopoly. You have two parties who have a monopoly on ideas, which means that you don't properly get accountability, because it operates in the same way that when you have a monopoly in a market, they control the market. So MMP allows for accountability because it allows for choice, which I think is crucial.
Great. So bringing it back a little bit to the Greens now, you've just gone from your highest poll ever at 15%, dropping right down to below the the threshold right now. So materials admission came well before this. What do you think happened?
Yeah, lots of things happened. There has been, I can't remember who conducted it, but there has been some qualitative research done to figure out why people have been moving around. And what we have seen is just basically ping-ponging between Labour and the Greens votes. And the pie has grown, which is ultimately the aim of the left bloc, really. But by and large, the majority of people have gone to Labour because of Jacinda, which is why I'm kind of gutted about the way that this race has been presidentialised now, and there's this major focus on the two parties, and I just think that is really lame for democracy when we operate in an MMP environment. Yeah, so there's lots of different factors at play, but do you want to ask me about any of them in particular? Or should I just
go into any of them?
Oh, no, if you want to. I mean, yeah, it's just been a rough few weeks, and I guess right now people are looking for safe harbours for their votes. So that's why we've been trying to make sure that people are aware that, in my personal opinion, we've got the best people, we've got the best policy, and we've got the best plans to actually make sure that we move towards a fairer country.
So why should we vote Greens over Labour?
So I don't know if it's necessarily like a Greens versus Labour thing. That's the whole point of the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, is to go, there are only two parties in this election that are actually committed to changing the government, i.e. National not being in power. So the reason that you should vote for the Greens is, I can tell you personally about why I joined the Green Party, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but last election I decided to run for the mayoralty because I was like, screw this, everything's wrecked and we all need to fix it, and everybody needs to be empowered to vote and stuff. And I decided to join the Greens after that and move towards, campaigning for central government stuff, because that's really high level, and there's also a lot of issues with, I'm a nerd for local government and think that it needs more funding and more of an ambit of power, and that's how you do it, is through central government. Also a constitutional reform nerd, but anyway, we can potentially get to that. So I joined the Green Party. You do not join the Green Party because you're like, here's my career, here's my progression, I'm going to climb the ranks and I'll get this cushy, ministerial position. It's not one of the two major parties. You join the Green Party because you believe in something, like very deeply, and you have done your research and you want to do the mahi, and you don't care who takes credit for your ideas. So thank you, Labour, for talking about climate change now. We just need a plan to get there, So why people should vote for the Green Party is because you're still going to get Jacinda as Prime Minister. But a vote for us is basically a vote to ensure that, again, Labour is held accountable to the things that they've started talking about. Because we have been campaigning on these things for 30 years when they were deeply unpopular. But we've always done what's right, not what's, worked in focus groups. So I would say that if you want a party of integrity who has the policy and the plans to back it up and the people to back it up, then that's a vote for the Green Party, and you're still going to get Jacinda. Yeah.
So you talked a bit there about your run in mayoralty.
Yep.
And you've admitted to that being sort of a protest almost. Is you standing for the Greens the same sort of thing? Is it along the same lines? Are you looking? What are you looking to do here?
Yeah. So the way that question is framed is like protest is a bad thing again, and I think that protest is legitimate. I think that protest should be legitimate, and it becomes legitimate when we see it as such. Protest should have genuine, concrete outcomes to it. When we look down on protest, we don't think that it's able to manifest those kinds of outcomes, but also we see it as something that other people do. And we again create this dichotomy where those people aren't part of civil society, for lack of a better way of talking about it. So yeah, it totally was a protest, but I think that it was a protest which major success would look like becoming the mayor. So a protest doesn't have to be mutually exclusive to running for political office. Because that's the thing, is typically what happens is when you say that they're a protest candidate, you're saying they're a joke candidate. But protest is not a joke in my mind. So yeah, still out here rallying against the system. And very deeply want change. And basically the way that I see it is like participatory democracy, representative democracy, it's a system that we've got, right? Regardless of whether you choose to participate in it, it governs your life. So I've met a lot of people, particularly on university campuses, who are like, I'm not going to vote, it's my protest. And I'm like, mate, that's a really ineffective protest. Firstly, because you're not adding your proverbial +1 to the way that you see the world, which means you don't cancel out the proverbial +1 of the person who sees the world the opposite of you, which means that you basically double the strength of their vote and their voice. They're probably the people who own the homes and, you know, all of the things. So, yeah, I guess that I would still be a protester to a certain extent, but again, being an activist, being a protester is not a bad thing. And you can do that inside Parliament. Yeah. And be in government too.
You said a vote for Green is still a vote for Jacinda as Prime Minister. Obviously, government's more than just a Prime Minister.
Yes.
At the top. I would like to remind people that. But at the end of the day, if Labour has a percentage than National, don't National have the first crack at forming that government? So do you understand why
the
people...
coalition talks.
Yeah, so isn't a vote for Labour still quite a strategic vote? It's not like, oh, well, Greens and
Okay,
Labour.
well, if you want to talk about strategy, and I'll be completely, like, I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about. This is the weirdest thing about being a politician. Like, you get some briefings from, like, press and media people, and then you're kind of just thrown to the wolves, and I'm really terrible at sound bites, except for the fact that we just launched our, like, student tertiary kind of package thing, me and James over there, and I said that right now being a student sucks, and they ran with that as the headline, so I'm getting better at strategic vote. Let's talk about that. So, right now, you may have seen in the polls that there have been 2 polls so far that have put the Greens below 5%. There's been a bunch of other polls dotted in between them where we've been above it. But the ones which are below 5% are obviously the ones which are really of interest to commentators, particularly right-wing commentators. So you may have seen Matthew Hooton recently, not a big fan of the Greens, but going on Talkback Radio and saying that a vote for the Green Party is now a vote for the National Party, which is absolute bollocks. And that's because he wants to ensure that we do get, 4.9%, which then means that all of our vote is redistributed predominantly between both Labour and National, which means that each of them equally get approximately 3 seats, which is great strategy from somebody who wants to destroy the left bloc. So the most strategic vote that you can actually cast in terms of party vote, if you want a progressive government this election, is for the Green Party, because we have guaranteed that we will be working with the Labour Party. So that's basically it. Yeah.
How fair is that threshold? How fair is it that ACT can be at 0.6% and still have a seat, still be in government?
Oh, dude. So for all that David Seymour wants to bash beneficiaries and talk about beneficiaries, he's been handed the biggest silver spoon in the country. Anyway, I could talk about him for a while, but we'll give him 0.06% of the time. So I do think that the threshold is potentially unfair. I obviously ran as an independent during the mayoralty, and that's because I did it just before enrolments closed to become a candidate, and I had no idea how you actually run on a ticket and things like that. But I found that when you are from outside what kind of, for lack of a better term, institutions deem as legitimate, you're not running on a traditional ticket or whatever, then you're not given the airtime, and therefore that kind of becomes potentially this self-fulfilling prophecy where you don't get anywhere near getting in because nobody deems you legitimate in the first place, which is basically the institutions protecting and perpetuating themselves. So in principle, I do think that it does need to be decreased, yeah.
Awesome. That's so interesting to hear you talk about that. So, climate change.
Yep.
Massive issue this coming election.
And has been for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine if we'd acted on it earlier, guys.
So, is what National is doing now, is it too little too late?
What is National doing now? I don't think they're doing anything. They've watched emissions go up 21%. We're one of the only countries in the world where emissions have continued to increase subsequent to 2010. Like, it's not good. It's really not good.
So what steps will the Greens be taking?
Lots. So on Sunday we announced our full climate action plan, and it's a 10-point plan. So off the top of my head, going to be totally honest, cannot recite all of those 10 points. It's very detailed. The short version of the document is like 24 pages. The major ones really are obviously committing to carbon neutral by 2050, but that's something which now a lot of parties have done. They just don't have plans of how to get there. So
how are you going to get there?
Yeah, so how we're going to get there is we've got our Sustainable Agriculture Fund, which is basically, so that taxes nitrates, which is something that you can do because Fonterra currently has the systems and the programs that do it. Basically, it's calculated to not increase the charges that farmers pay by more than 5% in terms of profit loss. And that will be enough of a price signal. We're hoping to have them look at alternatives. All of the tax revenue that we raise from that will be kind of ring-fenced and available to farmers who do want to progress towards sustainable farming. And then there's our Green Infrastructure Fund, which is the other massive one. So in our first term, that will look like $100 million, which is available to small businesses, social enterprises, individuals, organisations who want to create sustainable initiatives or businesses or programs. So, the thing about climate change is that it's not only, the world is actually going to be. Okay, no, I'll frame it a different way. So when we talk about climate change, we quite frequently talk about how we need to save the world. We've got to save the planet. Fact of the matter is that the planet has been through climate changes before, just not one that's man-made. And the planet is going to be fine. It's all of us and all of the species that we bring down with us that aren't going to be fine. So I think we need to reframe how we look at climate change as well. But then if we're talking about operating within the current economic paradigm, it also presents massive opportunities for high value jobs as well. And we're allowing that to pass us by. For all that Donald Trump banged on about oil and coal and gas in the States, solar panels, jobs in the solar panel industry outpace oil and coal and gas at 3-to-1 in the States alone. So there's a massive economic opportunity there, particularly for our generation.
Yeah, and what about the tax Greens hope to introduce on water?
So there's kind of two different sides to that. So there's the water bottling tax, and that is basically just recognising that when I was in Napier recently, obviously very Havelock North, and had to ask whether I could trust the water, that I was getting out of the tap. And that was a very bizarre thing, experience to catch myself going, is it safe to drink the water? And that's the whole point of the water bottling tax, is to go, how are we currently exporting and sending, millions of dollars offshore for companies that are paying next to nothing for bottling our most pristine water when New Zealanders cannot trust water that's coming out of the taps? So that's what the water bottling tax is, and that would be about 10 cents per litre. Then we've also said that we want to tax other water usage and consumption. So farmers would be the people who would be, most hit up for that money. And with that, we've said that we want to work with farmers to figure out the fairest form of pricing for it. So we don't have a figure on it yet.
So National, I think, have said that they won't be supporting
the
water tax because it will...
Yeah, because narratives are really handy in an election season,
will sort of have a flow-on effect to rural economies. It will make prices go up, and it'll also ascribe ownership to water. What's your response to that?
If we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. And our water, 60% of New Zealand rivers now, 60% of monitored New Zealand rivers are completely unswimmable. That wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. As I've just said, under successive governments, our emissions have gone up. We have an opportunity to change things. Change is never easy. But change requires everybody. In order to change everything, you need everyone, is something that Naomi Klein said, then Jeanette Fitzsimons on Sunday. For sure, we acknowledge the fact that change is difficult and painful, and it requires us to think about things in a different way. But that's why we want everybody to be part of the solution, because if we don't change, if we don't evolve, then we're all going to die. That's how it works, basically, in a nutshell. So... Yeah,
awesome. Well,
we want the opposite of that. We want flourishing,
And on Monday, Greens released their mental health policy. Yeah. Voting's already open now, and we're sort of 10 days out from election day. Is this too late? What happened here?
As to why we released policy, well, as you may have noticed, it's been a rough time for the Greens recently. So I think that resulted in a few of our policy releases happening later than initially intended.
So that wasn't
but they're still happening. Well, I'm not on campaign committee, so I don't know. But I was really stoked to be part of releasing our youth mental health policy in particular. That was a very emotional policy to help release, because this is, youth suicide, this is something which impacts pretty much everybody in this country. We all know somebody or have a mutual friend or, and I just find it despicable that we can talk about, how much money we're spending in relation to something like that. Like, people are literally dying. So I'm really proud that we've come up with a plan that will help address that in a very meaningful way. Because mental health, to begin with, I've been open about the fact that in the past, and mental health is not a linear process. I've dealt with anxiety and depression. And this as well really is a major signal for culture change. So I spoke openly with Vice about it and said that I would only talk to them about it if they provided full context for my life and how this manifested and stuff, because I didn't want it to be just a headline. But then there was this one line where I talked about when I was about 17 and things were really bad. I was almost drinking myself to death every night. And, well, not every night, but, whatever. And then the Stuff and Herald, the Herald, picked that quote up and ran with that as the headline for, So it's really, we need a culture change and we need structural change in order to support people, and we need to reduce stigma around mental health, and that's only going to happen if we talk about it openly. Anyway, that was like a million tangents, but yeah.
No, that's good. Certainly myself, I really appreciate people in positions such as yours being able to speak openly about mental health. I think we don't talk about it enough anyway, and the stigma's still there. I know
it is.
The John Kirwan effect is still there, but I mean, as we say, there's still a stigma.
Yeah.
What can you just run us through? What is the Greens mental health policy? Because actually, I don't really know either, and honestly, if I was going to the polls tomorrow to vote, I've still got, Labor's nursing policy in my head, because they've been saying that for weeks.
Yeah, and they get cut through as well.
Yeah. So what's the Greens policy around that?
Yeah, so on that point as well, it didn't get obviously anywhere near as much cut through, because the two major parties now are sucking all of the oxygen out of the room, and it's being run like a first past the post election, particularly in mainstream media. But Lifeline came out yesterday or the day before. I have no sense of the concept of time at the moment. But they came out after we released our policy and said that the next government, whatever it looked like, had to enact our policy into law. So it's four-pronged, basically, and it is all framed around what is called a zero suicide approach. So that is basically acknowledging that one life lost is too many. And it's something which has been instituted in certain states in America and has had massive impact. It's about 75% reduction, which obviously still isn't anywhere near enough, but it's a starting point. So the first part is basically to provide, and bear in mind this is a youth mental health policy, but we do as well have a broader mental health policy. But youth mental health policy, first point is free unlimited counselling services for 25 and under. The second point is $100 million for the mental health system at large. So that would look like, restoring funding to places like Lifeline, but also ensuring that we had more beds in mental health wards, and that people who slipped through, who weren't able to get support at that top level, had another level to catch them. The third one is integrating into schools, and into the health kind of curriculum, mental health, and kind of looking at the whole haora and well-being. and also ensuring that there is a guidance counsellor in every school, 1 to every 400 students. Currently it's approximately 1 to every 800. And then the final one is a full inquiry into the state of mental health, the mental health system, because at the moment, I'm not sure if any of you have been through it or know people who have, but really not fit for purpose. Yeah.
Because in Dunedin we have student health.
Yeah.
And currently that's capped around about 5-6 sessions and quite a long waiting list. What free unlimited sessions are you offering here? Is it for GPs to get medication, or is it counselling?
It's counselling services, yeah.
Where's that?
So they would be in all cities. There would be a process for universities to apply to have them specifically on campuses, and potentially schools that are under a lot of strain to apply to have them in their schools as well. But it would basically be that, wherever the need is, that's where the counsellors would go. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that answers the question. I'm going to chuck you a big curveball here. What if, this is a massive hypothetical.
Yep.
What if Labour didn't get the mandate and National couldn't form a government, and they thought, you know what, maybe it is time we address climate change, all these issues. Greens, come with us. We'll adopt some of your policies.
Wow. Yeah, so, in order for that to happen, they would have to get through this dogmatic ideological impasse, which is that GDP is king, Thing with GDP, right? GDP, gross domestic product, it is literally just a measure of economic transactions. Not a great measure for the success of our country, despite the fact that it's frequently touted as that. GDP goes up when someone gets cancer, or when there's a car crash, or when there is an oil spill like Rena, or an earthquake like there was in Christchurch. It is literally just economic transactions. So right now, also propped up by our housing crisis. Also, that 3% growth, which is frequently lauded about 2% of that is, so 2 of the 3% is consumptive growth. So that is basically our population growing, and we're buying more stuff off of each other. And only 1% of that is actually productive growth. So that's prompted different organisations from around the world to go, actually, New Zealand's in a productivity recession. So that's why we need to be focusing on value-added exports in particular. So, yeah, back to your question about National, it would basically, if they were a totally different party, yeah, but that's... that's kind of the point.
But if humanity's going to end, and if species are going to die, as you say, and National said, you know what, we've ignored you for too long.
Yeah, well, okay, so this is kind of about how, I guess, governments form, and, confidence and supply agreements and coalition agreements. You always have to make concessions about policy, or otherwise. We just do not see that there's any chance that we're going to get certain concessions from the National Party. But, other than that, we have worked from the crossbenches really well with the National Party, actually, on things like the Warm Up Our Homes scheme, where we insulated thousands of homes, and then National cut it because it wasn't popular in the news anymore. And we've done that with national cycleways and things as well. So we've actually achieved a lot from the crossbenches, which is why you should put us in government. But yeah.
So that's a maybe?
Well, they would have to be a different party. Like, that's basically the gist of it. Is I'm really. And okay, so, and you may have recognised this with, just going to throw it out there because, there's 10 days till the election, what can happen? Like with the Opportunities Party, right? So there's all these people, and this is similar with certain other factions within certain parties, but the people who proclaim to loathe identity politics the most, I have frequently seen, are the ones who are most likely to practice it, because they see that that's their team. Like they identify with that colour or whatever. So I think that politics, particularly with certain teams, like the blue team, it's very polarised, and this is part and parcel of a broader issue which I could talk all day about, but I'm really unhappy with the fact that we've depoliticised both public and private spaces. So when we talk about politics, frequently we anticipate that we're going to have a yelling match with each other, because we're just going to talk past each other and we're never going to get through to each other, because politics isn't part of daily life, or at least we don't think it is. I personally believe that everything is political. But I just think that we need to create more constructive spaces for people to engage in politics in a way that isn't dogmatic but is constructive and collaborative.
Yeah, that's such an awesome point and a great way to think about New Zealand politics, I think. All right, so we'd love to keep talking. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left, so
Cool.
Towards the end of our interviews, we like to do a little sort of quickfire question section, if that's all right.
Yes.
Cool. All right, so first up, Donald Trump. If he was Prime Minister of New Zealand, what do you think his first move would be?
Oh,
What do you think he'd do first?
Well, the week that I joined the Green Party, which was at the end of last year, Metiria stood up in Parliament and said that we would be the only party that would not be congratulating Donald Trump for becoming president, because he ran a campaign of divisiveness and dog whistling on, racism and sexism, etc. So really stoked about that and maintain that position as well. But yeah, what he would do in New Zealand, God, I don't know, pull us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is the stupidest move of all time as well, because the Paris Climate Agreement also is not binding. That was such a tokenistic move, which is just, deeply ideological and silly. Anyway, next question.
Okay. More lighthearted one. What's the first thing you think of when you see this?
Oh boy. Just word, just a little bit awkward. But he's trying. I mean, I do give him points for trying. Yeah.
Okay. If you could pull any MP's ponytail, who would it be?
Yeah, so this is what we were talking about before. I think that's a deeply gendered question because I don't know of any men with long hair in Parliament at the moment, so it'd have to be a woman. Pass.
Great answer. Okay, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see this?
I love her so much. I just Aroha. I just love Marama. Yeah, all of the Maramas. Marama Fox and Marama Davidson. It'd be a great coalition, eh?
Best looking MP, and you can't say Todd Barclay.
He's not even good looking. Oh boy, this is so when you become this weirdly public person, which has been a very bizarre experience for me, because I was a normal person, I still am a normal person, but your life becomes this smorgasbord which the media can kind of pull stuff out of. I've basically had every single comment about my personal appearance possible. I've had every comment about the way that I dress. I've had every comment about my sexuality and my potential partner and blah, blah, blah. So I'm refusing to answer that question.
Fair enough. I'm going to have to reach for the paper here. This is quite a long-winded question.
Oh, God. Okay. Yep.
You're stuck on a desert island with Bill English,
Please,
Winnie P,
no, this is not going to be. Okay. Yep.
Gareth Morgan, and Paula Bennett. You're all starving, and death is inevitable if you don't eat something, or someone, I should say. Who's the first person you'd cannibalise and why?
Oh, boy.
For those in Laws 101, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think that... Is this one of those situations where I can just starve myself on principle because I'm stuck on an island with those people? I don't know. Can I?
Is that an opt-out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We have some. Finish the sentences, if that's all right.
Okay. Yep.
So, first up, I absolutely hate sharing the elevator with.
Never. Don't encounter many elevators. Someone talking on their cell phone really loudly, I guess, would be the
Yep. Who needs to learn to shut up during question time?
David Seymour. And just generally in debates as well. I'm not sure if you've seen his performances, but yeah. I'm debating him tomorrow on TVNZ, the youth debate. You should all watch it. It'll be great. I hope.
And your biggest role model in politics currently is who?
Oh, this is going to sound, it's kind of obvious. I would have to say James, just because of the way that he's dealt with the hand that he's been dealt in the past kind of few weeks. He stood by Met and then after that, all of the flak that was thrown at him, and he's really pulled the team together, and I think we're stronger than ever. So yeah, I'd say James Shaw, co-leader, now leader of the Green Party.
What's the first thing you think of when you see this?
Oh, just
coalition
he's
partner, maybe?
Tired. He's really tired. He's 72. Do you know that? Yeah, I don't know. Just tired more than anything, eh? Like, I think he needs a break. That's my wild card prediction, just because anything could happen this election, is New Zealand first slips below 5%. That's my wild card. So, there you go.
All right, last one. And we're going to do exactly the same. What's the first thing you think of when you see this?
I don't know why, but I think the flag referendum. Yeah, that's the flag referendum.
Fair enough.
Yeah, which was just abysmal and worst thing. Like the thing that annoyed me the most about the flag referendum, and this is potentially because I'm a constitutional reform nerd, but it was about like our brand and New Zealand Inc. It wasn't about who we are as a country or what we stand for, which is I think the conversation that we should be having right now.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for now. It's been so awesome to hear you talk, and we've brought up some really insightful points. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. So thank you all for coming.